The scene is yours.
Right. Okay, thank you, everybody. Can I recommend an Apple Mac? Right. What we would like to do is to talk a little bit about the research that we've been doing since 2010 on Rousay, on the island of Rousay, which is part of the Orkney group. And we're looking at a multi-period site that is subject to coastal erosion. And about half of the site has been destroyed already by the sea. And the rest is in danger of further erosion. Just to give you a little bit of a feel for the problems the site is facing, hopefully this will work. So that just gives you a little bit of a feel for the tidal action that is hitting the site every day. Sometimes it's worse when being driven by gale force winds. And we're also seeing problems of suction of deposits as the tide goes out. Deposits that are waterlogged, the finer sediments are drawn away, so we have collapse. So we have two actions there of coastal erosion hitting that particular site. The site is part of a series of sites on the West coastline, and I've just marked a few on the slide there. You've got North Howe, South Howe, and Mid Howe, which are Brock sites, and the Yorville Mid. Not on.
Yeah,
right. The Yorville Mid Howe Cairn. Burnt Mound. What's important, and Julie will be talking a little bit about this later on in evaluating the significance. This channel between Rousay and the mainland island of Orkney, the Ironhallow Sound, is of particular importance because it's a gateway going outwards into the Atlantic, and from the Atlantic is the gateway going into the more sheltered waters with the islands of Orkney that you see in the small map of the Orkney Islands there in the corner. There's a significance of that coastline throughout prehistory. We have a number of Neolithic chambered cairns along that coastline, a number of Brock sites. So this is an important landscape, and the sea is part of that system. So we're dealing with a seascape, a landscape, and the relationships between the two. We try to work hard to promote the problems of coastal erosion. And we were first invited to look at aspects of coastal erosion on Rousay by Julie Gibson, who's the regional archaeologist, who was the regional archaeologist. She's only just retired, and she's done a fantastic job looking at the problems of Orkney's coastal resource and heritage, and produced a really wonderful little book about that aspect. What we've tried to do is to promote the problems of coastal erosion with the article in Current Archaeology. The middle one is an article that is in Archaeology Scotland in an issue specifically looking at erosion and sustainability of sites. And more recently, just a month ago, we had an article looking at climate change and coastal erosion in The Economist. Also, a few weeks ago, we were presented with a prize, the Rescue Archaeology Project of the Year, by the readers of Current Archaeology. I'd like to thank all those students, some of them are here, who've been part of the excavation and research program. They've all made valuable contributions. And what's so good is the training that we've offered students keep coming back and back and back up year after year. The lady with the trophy in her hand on the far side is Alice, who started with us back in 2010, graduated, has a job in archaeology, has been taking her holidays and unpaid leave to come and excavate with us year after year and help supervise. Together with next to her, we've got another student who's been with us since 2014. This is Rose, and again, it's the transfer of knowledge, which I think is so important in a project like this, which is a university project where we've got layers of experience and the enthusiasm of the people who take part. That enthusiasm also transcends into the staff of the department. And here we've got Tom Sparrow, Chris Gaffney, Sarah George, Andy Wilson, Julia Beaumont, and Hannah and Kathy pictured there, all of who have taken a major part in the research program. And on the bottom far side, the near side here, we have Jackie McKinley, who's holding the pig skull, and Kaz Manuel. Jackie has been working with us. She was a graduate of the university in, if I'm right, in 1981, I think she probably graduated. And then Kaz Manuel, who also is a graduate of the university and has really been a great support to the project. She's actually the person behind the Swandro Trust. So we have to thank our external colleagues as well. To be able to excavate a site like Swandro, we have to be able to adapt traditional excavation methods. And by that, one of the big problems that we have is, how do you record a site where you've got shifting beaches? Every tide comes in will take material away. You've got huge problems in terms of different levels. You've got huge gradients. How do you put conventional methods of planning into an archaeological project like that? Well, you can't. So you have to adapt and bring in new methods. And here, the picture there is Lindsay Kemp, who's in the audience tonight, who's been the mainstay of the project in terms of the three-dimensional planning and recording. So by taking photogrammatic images, processing them into 3D models, and then transferring them to orthographic projections, we can get plans and cross sections where we want them, and with great detail as well. And we're able to, with the ingenuity that Lindsay has, be able to manipulate them to actually look at year by year, because every year we're opening up a different zone of the site. Another mainstay of the recording has been work with Andy Wilson, and this is Nicole Burton, who's a PhD student who's in the writing up phase at the moment of a PhD. And there you can see an elevation of one of our buildings. We'll be talking about this building shortly. And you can see the laser scanner there that she's used to produce that those images. Again, it like the photogrammetry, it gives us versatility. It enables us to look at things from different view sheds. So we've got a fragile site that's been eroded by the sea. We've got methodologies. We also need to have a research context. We have to have research questions. And this is built on, should I say, 40 years of experience. This is a site that I excavated on behalf of what is now Historic Environment Scotland, but had a series of names during the time the project went on. This is a site on Sanday called Tostness. It's an Iron Age site. What's important about it is that it's an early Iron Age site, and also it's low status. Why is that important? Well, a decade later, we started an excavation on another site. This is the site of Old Scadness, and it's a village. And it's a village around a broch. So in the centre there, you can see the huge broch, and there's a close-up of the broch on the far side. Just to give you an idea of scale, the coloured elements in the picture are people. And what's important about this site is that the broch is early. It upset a number of people because it blew apart some of the ideas of the time. It promoted other ideas of the time. The brochs actually had an earlier sequence. And what you're seeing there is different phases of the site that are open, but what we have is a whole sequence of buildings that transcend the Iron Age. In fact, we have a whole sequence of buildings that go back to the 1960s, but you don't see them there because we've already excavated them. What's key about this long sequence is we were able to look at cultural change, environmental change, economic change, but also we're able to look at what happens when you have this long Iron Age, because we don't have the Romans, so the late Iron Age or Pictish period goes right up to there's a period of cultural change when Scandinavian peoples come in, when the Vikings arrive. And what you're seeing in the bottom plan there is a distribution with those blue dots of artifacts, steatite artifacts, which are Viking artifacts. And Julie's going to be talking about that later. I'll just point out the line sinker there, which was found in one of the buildings, together with a series of other steatite artifacts, and together with flax, which again appears when Scandinavian peoples first come. And that has that particular form of a line sinker has a parallel in southern Norway. Right. So Julie's going to be talking about this aspect, this transition later on, because I think this is one of the most exciting elements of the project. It is what actually happens at the end of our long archaeological sequence. So Julie's going to expand on that. This is just an example of how we've been able to use Lindsay's work, because in the number of years that we've been excavating on this site, we've never been able to excavate the whole, open up the whole thing, because we have to remove the beach in order to do it, and that takes a long time. So what we've had to do is actually excavate windows within the site to be able to look at it and create a composite. Chris and Tom came up and did various forms of geophysical survey, including radar, earth resistance, and so on. And this is one of the plots that actually shows the limits of the settlement. On the far side, if you look, you may see some linear trends going across. That's part of the Viking houses, which Julie will be talking about, that lay on top of the settlement. But you can see there is a distinct boundary to the settlement. And basically what we're seeing is the big roundhouse in the middle and a series of buildings around the outside, half of which have been destroyed by the sea. We've tested that, and we've actually proved that what we're seeing there is buildings going around the outside. The excavation of the site started in 2010. Julie found the site by accident, by walking on the beach. In fact, it survived in the erosion zone of the beach, sticking upright, sticking out of the boulder beach. Clearance of that over a couple of years revealed that we had a big circular structure, and you can see a series of casement walls there. The outer wall there, I'll come back to if you can sort of remember that picture, and you can see the problems at high tide. This is the same sequence of walls, but the first one was 2012, this is 2015. Most of the core material between the casement walls on the outer side has been pulled out, and we've also lost a lot of the outer ring just in 3 years. Here you can see some of the large stones. You see some of them quite regular blocks. This is wall material that has been pulled out by the sea, and we've been able to excavate down, and we have material, some material under that wall that butts the roundhouse wall, and we've got dates from the core of the walls and from that under that secondary wall, which gives us a time frame somewhere between 800 and 400 old money BC. Okay. When we look at the flank of the site, what we're seeing is that there's a shadow, an erosion shadow. The big roundhouse has actually protected part of the beach, and in that erosion shadow, we actually have steps. And what we've done here is just taken all the beach material away, and you can see one of those steps there with a black and white scale, and you can see further back there. What we've got is a rather wet and slushy midney material, and then a truncated floor, a level, and then there's another level going further up. So we've got a series of steps. So if you're walking up from the beach to the land, you're literally stepping in time. This is a structure that Julie first found. It's an orthostatic structure. If you look on, you may just be able to see the red and white pole there in relationship to the roundhouse as a close-up there. What we're dealing with is a series of upright stones, which is part of a roundhouse. We've lost most of it. What we have there is just the circumference on the landward side surviving. The seaward side of the roundhouse is completely gone. But what's interesting is that big flagstone has been cut to fit that bay, and it has two regular notches that have been cut in. And it appears this would have held uprights, which would have held a mezzanine level going around the circumference of the building. We've got other examples from Scatness that give us parallels for this type of construction. Also within that building, again, adjacent to the cell that that flag is in, we've got the remains of an oven. There you can see it looking down into it. There you can see it looking across into it. You can see there's several layers of burning, which Kathy's got Archimag dates from. It has a very good parallel with an oven that we found in a dedicated building where we see ash pits, a huge hearth, and a very similar oven with similar relationships in Structure 8 at Old Scatness. So we've got a really good parallel for that. The dates for that are about 200 BC. The dates for this about 100 to BC to 100 AD, something like that. We can actually come out. This is that big flag again, and we can come out, and we've got a threshold stone. So there's been a doorway there, another threshold stone, and a passageway which leads into another passageway which goes into the centre of the roundhouse. So this building is connected to that big roundhouse. What's interesting is if we look underneath that, we've got earlier deposits. We've got a wall which you saw earlier, probably in the slides, you may have noticed that, and it's a single face wall, and against it, what we've got is that yellow or whitish clay, which is part of a floor deposit. Going through underneath that, we've got more midden and eventually the water table, making it almost impossible to excavate. But what's interesting is the pottery that's coming up from there is a pottery form with a flat splayed rim, lots of inclusions, and it was almost identical to the pottery that came from that early roundhouse I showed you at Tosnes at the beginning. As I said, we were only able in years, as the years progressed, to actually look at keyholes. We couldn't open up the whole site, and this is a series of pictures that illustrate that. We've got the big roundhouse, just the entranceway showing there. We haven't got our structure 1 that I've been talking about. That's under the beach at this stage of the excavation. But what we have is another building that's been truncated, structure 2 and structure 3. And I'm going to talk about the centre one and then move on to the far one, structure 3. This just gives you an idea of the archaeology and the complexity. We've already taken away a Pictish phase of that building, and it's come down onto a flagged floor. And you can see how the survival, the coastal erosion has taken away the seaward side, and as you come to the landward side, the survival gets better. You may see a walling in cross section and some flagging going across above that flagging, which is this Pictish phase of south we've taken away. Underneath that, what we have is a floor surface which has a lot of metalworking debris. We also have a coin, which is a coin of mid-4th century coin of Constance, which comes from that. And we've also got within it a large stone line tank. 3, and very different building. This is during the excavation. You can see there's a passageway coming down. You actually have to come down a series of steps. So this is partly subterranean. So you're actually having to come down into that building. There's a central hearth. The hearthstone that goes across would have been much taller. It actually had snapped in antiquity, so we've taken the top part away. But if you notice the blackness of the deposits, and there's that long stone, beach stone, and a small stone to the top of it. There's alignment of stone going towards that ombre in the wall. Those are both anvils. This building is a metalworking building. Lots of evidence of metalworking, slag, crucibles, mold fragments, a few tuias, and also Jerry McDonnell, who's an archaeometallurgist who brought his XRF machine and has done a lot of work analysing the material from this for us. And what's interesting is that what we're seeing is a lot of use of copper alloy casting. So it's a lot of casting of copper artifacts. We're also getting lots of evidence of hammer scale as well. And with the evidence that he's got from the surveys work that he's done, what seems to be happening is that the working end of the site is where Jerry is, that side of the hearth. This side of the hearth is where the tuia would have been. The building itself could be locked from the inside, and it could be locked from the outside. So you have a dual locking system. Now, if you're in there with metalworking, what's going to be crucial to gauge temperature change, etc., it's going to be the color of the flames, the color of the metal. So being able to control that, I think, is really important. And I think that may well explain why you've got this dual system of being able to control entrance and exit to that building. You can see the door pivot stone just at the base of the wall there. This is the large long beach stone I showed you, and it's got carbon marks on it, which appear to be handprints, and there are prints against it which appear to be from certain leads, if you like. If it's very similar to the carbon that we see on painted Pictish pebbles, where it's a mixture of grease and sweat for the people working in there, and the carbon, and it's soaked into those stones. What's interesting is underneath, if you look on this side, underneath that building, we've got a wall. And that wall obviously predates the usage of that building. It's very similar in structure to the wall that we see there at Old Scadness. And in fact, what we've got there, we think, is a ditch wall. We first saw it on the other side a few years earlier. And last year we went back to revisit it. And you can see the infield part of the structure 3 where we backfilled it. And you may just see that black line there where we've gone down. And we've got a ditch that has a series of phases. And it's been reconstructed with the walls and that last rubble fill, but the earlier version of the ditch is coming down the sides with this dark material coming through. So we're very fortunate. We've got a lot of animal bone from the various elements of the fill, so we should be able to build a really good chronology to the ditch itself. Our radiocarbon dates for structure 3, that metalworking phase, are 1st century BC, 1st century AD, going through to the 2nd century AD. So whatever is happening with this ditch, which is quite monumental in many ways, because what you've got to think is not only have we got the ditch, but we've also would have had the rampart as well, dates to a period earlier than that. Just going back very quickly, we've got evidence of Pictish buildings. I said something about the Pictish architecture. This is a building near the Roundhouse, right at the top of the beach, and here you've got a flagged floor and also a hearth that's constructed into the wall. We've seen other hearths like that again at Old Scadness, and what we've got there is a corn dryer, lots of carbonized grain that's come from the floor surface, and that paved floor surface presumably has multiple functions, but part of the functions can be for threshing. Up to the Roundhouse, this is a view of those casement walls. I just want very quickly to look at some aspects of the Roundhouse. Here you can see the way that the erosion has taken away, and how the archaeology has been truncated to that gradient. And here you can see the entrance, and I think you should be able to see that the Roundhouse is actually multi-phase. There's a number of different wall lines there. It's almost a jigsaw puzzle, being able to try and understand what's happening there and the sequences. I'm going to be talking about that room right at the top there, with the rigid pole and that large slab, and also we've got a rotary quern fragment in the floor surface there. You may see that circular stone with a hole in it. This is a view looking at the floor surface, and what you don't appreciate when looking down on it is the standing archaeology that we have, and this whole room is formed by upright slabs, orthostats. On that floor, we've found a number of artifacts, including Roman glass, and here we've got a glass toggle bead, and in fact we've got 2 toggle beads from these deposits on the floor. and I think there's 8 or 9 from Scotland as a whole, something like that.
I think it's more now. I think it's about 12.
So maybe 12. So it's quite significant. This last summer, we excavated and sectioned through and went down and found another floor level underneath. And just to give you an idea of that in plan, you can see the paved area coming through. And we also have the entranceway, which is, if you look at the just above the scale going through, that's the entranceway. And if you look very carefully, you can see there's a sort of triangular element with a stone in. That stone has been hollowed out. It's a pivot stone, so that's the doorway coming through. So the doorway would have come inwards from that point. And this is where I hand over to Julie.
Hi, so I'm going to talk about the later parts of the site, the later Iron Age and onwards, and so we're back in that roundhouse again, in the central roundhouse, and Steve's been talking about the third, I suppose, of the circumference that's on the left-hand side, and I'm going to talk about what's happening in those other rooms and passageways out towards the sea from there. And just to finish off the part that Steve was talking about, as we on top of those floor levels from the Middle Iron Age that Steve was talking about, it seems like this third then became unoccupied. There are certain middens and deposits within them, and within those middens and deposits are things like these. There's lots of animal bone, really well preserved. I just put 2 tasters up for you. The skull at the top on the left-hand side is the skull of a white-tailed eagle. They've been extinct in Orkney since, I don't know, several hundred years. There's been a few nesting on Hoy in the last 50 years or so, but they're not really back yet. And down at the bottom is something which definitely is never coming back again. That's part of the skull of a great auk. And the last great auk was killed in the 18th century. They were large, flightless, penguin-like birds throughout the North Atlantic. So we've got lots of other animal bone. I'll just give you another example with really only just starting to work on the environmental remains from the site. But in some of those other segments as we come out, when they went out of occupation, we're finding lots and lots of animal bone, some of it articulated over the floors. In this case, what you're looking at here is something which seems to be a signal of the site, which is a lot of pig bone, more pig than you would have expected. And so that's a little concentration over on the left-hand side of the slide there. And over on the right is a skull that comes from one of the rooms I'm just about to talk to you about. There's several skulls like that. I've never seen whole skulls of pigs from Iron Age sites before. This is quite an old sow. It's got very, very worn teeth. And it may not look like Percy pig to you, and that's because these are pre-18th century agricultural improvement pigs. These have the long snouts like wild boar have. In the middle is something, again, I've never seen before, which is a scapula from a pig, which has broken and partially healed. You don't normally see broken, healed domestic animal bones in archaeology because people tend to kill animals when they get to that point. So for some reason, this was an animal they really wanted to keep. Maybe it was a really good breeding sow, or it was a boar, an important boar, but this one has definitely been kept. How it got to break that bone is a different matter. Just below this level where all the animal bone is, we came across something we really didn't expect, and it wasn't Alan Braby, who you can see on the left there, who's a well-known archaeologist in Scotland, but the thing he's excavating, which is a furnace. And we didn't expect this for several reasons. A, they're really rare things to find. B, it's in what appears to be the centre of the village, in the main occupation building. You don't put a furnace somewhere like that. Furnaces are smelly. There's lots of fumes. There's lots of bad things about them. You put them on the edge of a settlement, not in the middle, which kind of suggests that by the point this furnace was in operation, that main building had gone out of use. We know it's an iron furnace. It's an iron smelting furnace, which again is something quite unusual, and we really need to get some dates from that to find out what that's all about. In the same room as it, we found this, which is also something I'm finding it really hard to get a parallel for. This is a steatite, a soapstone handled bowl, which you'd normally think might be a lamp. You might see something like that in Shetland. I've not seen a handled one in Shetland that I know of. You don't find soapstone in Orkney. You find soapstone deposits in Shetland, and it comes to Orkney with the Vikings, but this isn't a Viking artifact. Everybody I showed it to who is a Viking specialist got very snooty about it and said, no, it definitely wasn't Viking. It's not well enough made. But the other thing about it is the heating is actually on the bottom, not on the inside, which is not right for a lamp. And it's gone schistose, which is very unusual for steatite. Steatite can take quite high temperatures, but it seems to be flaking and disintegrating at the bottom, which suggests this has been in really high temperatures. And I don't know why. So anybody does, please tell me.
I think it's a crucible.
Yeah, but there's nothing on the inside. But anyway, I can show you. Yes.
Yeah.
So the building next to the one with, or rather the room next to the one with the furnace in, so going back inland towards the room that Steve's been talking about, was also quite an unusual one. Also had lots of animal bone in it, including that skull I've just shown you. And in the centre of it, when we took those deposits away, there was a huge amount of rubble, which is mostly removed in this photograph. And in the centre of the room, you can see this lovely hearth with a nice curbstone around it. It's a nice Iron Age hearth. What's unusual about it are the things at either side. You can just see one of them here. If you look at the white point of that red ranging pole that goes across that hearth, you can see a round thing that looks like a top hat buried in the ground. And when you look at this, when we look at this in more detail, there's two of them. The one on the left-hand side is in poor condition, it's disintegrated. The one on the right is much better. And what they are whalebone vertebrae. And they've been hollowed out and set into the ground either side of that hearth, which suggests that they're holding some kind of superstructure over the hearth, whether that's for a spit, whether it's for a cauldron, whatever it's for. It does suggest a kind of specialist function to this room. And in fact, there's Alice, because we managed to take that one out, and you can just gives you some idea of the size of this thing. It's been cut down. It's whalebone vertebrae. All the processes have been cut off it, and the bottom has been shaped to fit into that hole next to the hearth. So as we come into this later Iron Age phase, whatever is happening in this central building, which seems like it's gone out of use as the main house, if you like, the big house of the settlement, there's a lot of indications that this is still a really, I hate to use the word high status, but I'm probably going to because I can't think of an alternative, but it's a really important settlement. It's a rich settlement. It's a rich estate in the late Iron Age, just as it has been in the Middle Iron Age and earlier, by the look of it. And that may well have something to do with its access to those routeways, to its access to things like iron and tin and lead, iron and silver and lead, not tin. And those indications of trade with the Roman material. And it's still that as we get into the late Iron Age period, the Pictish period. And just one little indication of this is that thing on the right-hand side, which is a piece of worked red deer antler. And it's a horse, part of horse harness. It's a cheap piece. You get these from the Bronze Age onwards. Get quite a lot of them in the Iron Age. This is quite late for one of these. But before you had iron to produce the parts of the horse harness, a nice bit of strong antler is the best you're going to get. And you can even see that the hole in it is a strange kind of shape. It's like a locking thing. So you could put something in there and twist it to keep it in place. What's really interesting about that is we're on a very small island with a big hill in the middle of it. And this suggests somebody, well, we do know anyway, we have horse bones from the site, that somebody is riding horses in the late Iron Age on this site and finds it important to have the right gear and so on. And again suggests something which is much more much higher status than we might have expected. And that brings us, as Steve was saying, to part of the reason why this site is so interesting to us. And that is that where it sits and what it might be about. And the sites that we've been looking at, things like Old Scatness, things like Jarlshof in Shetland as well, led both Steve and I to think that as you get into the Viking settlement in the Northern Isles, it maybe wasn't quite what people were expecting, in that people go looking for longhouses. I'm simplifying, but people go looking for longhouses when they want to find Viking settlement. And in fact, maybe you need to turn it the other way around and look for where are the big juicy settlements, the big estates that they might be interested in. And that's certainly where we've been finding evidence for the earlier Viking settlement in Shetland, at Jarlshof, not quite so much, but certainly at Old Scatness, and now we think at Swandro. And one of the red flags, one of the reasons Swandro looks so interesting, as Steve says, is where it sits. It sits on Ironhallow Sound. And not only that, but not very far away from it is one of the best Viking Age cemeteries in Scotland at Westness. And it's a Pictish and Viking Age cemetery. It has 2 boat burials that you can see, people with swords, shields, spears, all the kinds of things you might expect. And one of the burials had that enormous, fantastic silver gilt, amber studded brooch with it as well, which gives you an idea of the kind of people we've got in this cemetery. These are some of the other finds. Western Cemetery is not published. James Graham Campbell is working on this at the moment, but it's never been published. It was excavated in the 70s. But nevertheless, you can see from the plans that we do, not fully published, I should say, we have both what look like the Pictish, Christian, east-west, ornamented graves, unfurnished graves, and then these other graves, including the 2 boat burials, which don't cut into Pictish graves. And some of the fantastic things that are from them, the combs, the swords, steers like such vessels, you see, much better made, and the pin. So we have Westness Cemetery, and then just to give you an idea of how close we are, and what this landscape looks like, the picture on the left shows you, if you're looking down over Swandro, you're looking out into the Atlantic. So that is literally from there, you're looking out to the Atlantic. Costa Head there on the big hill in the background on the left. If you're sailing along here, you sail out of there, you turn that way, you turn left, you're heading down the west coast of Scotland, down through the Western Isles, eventually to Ireland. If you coming in this way and you come in through this sound past Swandro, and you can see on the second slide on the right hand side, that little bump you can see on the edge of the bay there is the Westness Cemetery. This is looking from Swandro. That's how close it is. So there's every chance that the people, the Picts and the Vikings who are buried at Westness were living at Swandro, or at least some of them. And if you go that way along Ironhallow Sound, basically you're in among the Isles. You know, it is a major routeway from the sea. Now, these 2 sites, Westness and Swandro, have a long history. Again, as Steve was mentioning, there's a longhouse on the site at Swandro, except it's never been called Swandro. It was called Westness, mostly, which is very confusing. So there's the Westness house, which sits next to the Swandro excavation. So if you look at that picture on the right-hand side, you can see a guy holding up something in his hand. It's a level. Is it a level?
No,
scale?
It's one of the photographic
Oh, is it
tripods.
one of the photographic tripods?
Yeah. The chap with the white hat.
Yeah, with the white hat, holding the stick. The thing behind him, that mound, that's the Roundhouse at Swandro. That's how close we are. But these have been treated as 2 different sites for a long time. In fact, on that same picture, if you look to the left, there's a girl kneeling down with a blonde ponytail. Judging by how deep she is in there, although she is technically in the Westness Longhouse, she is probably digging intricately entwined. And we know that now from the work that we've done on the beach, looking at the sections there and looking at the material, that literally this longhouse sits right over the edge of structure 3, the room with the anvils in that Steve was telling you about. Again, this isn't published yet, so this is really quite difficult. The little fragment of a sword you can see up at the top there, and again, this is work that James Graham Campbell's been doing recently, was always known as the Swandro sword because it was found in the 19th century. It was ploughed up, the record said, at Swandro, and everybody said, no, it can't be, it must be from the Western Cemetery. But it probably isn't. There is probably at least one more Viking burial somewhere near that site, possibly the founder burial. So the rumour had kind of grown up, I think. People assumed that this building, this longhouse, which you can just see 2 cross walls up by the scale there, right up at the top right of the slide, was a late Norse building. In other words, something from maybe the 11th century or later, not first settlers. And those people in the Western's graves are first settlers. 2 of them, the isotopic work on them suggests they are from northern Scandinavia. One of them is north of the Arctic Circle. One of them has 4 arrowheads round about his stomach area, which kind of indicates he didn't have the most peaceful of lives, let's say. So we're kind of missing that gap, if you like, between when Vikings should have been appearing on the site in the 9th century, if we were right, through to something that people thought was an 11th century building. And at Scatness, we found evidence that just looking for the longhouses isn't helping us, because what we found at Old Scatness in Shetland, that building in the top left-hand photograph, is a very, very old Middle Iron Age house. It stood for about 300 years, probably, at least. So it's old in both senses of the word. And the phase you can see there, the central hearth has been covered over, it's all been paved over. And on top of that, there's lots of evidence of ironworking and stuff going on. And then the whole building is filled in. And in the infill of that building, we've got lots of artifacts, Viking period artifacts. So somebody's been using that house in a way it's not meant to be used. And then they've filled it in with lots of rubble and so on. And then at the top, having filled it all up to the wall heads, somebody built a longhouse, a timber longhouse. We haven't got the longhouse. What we've got is the floor. And you'll have to take my word for this because I can't quite point it out to you. But there is a long hearth, the kind of thing you'd get in a Viking longhouse, across the middle of that floor, and it's even got the bake stone at the end, where you would be cooking your flatbreads and so on in your Viking house. And it had a big pile of loom weights from the loom over in the corner. So we've got basically part of the floor of the longhouse, and everything else is gone because it's timber. And then a little later, over in that bottom right-hand picture from Old Scatness, you can see the arc of the Broch wall going round there, and a whole load of stone has been, that Broch wall has been demolished. The stone has been pushed off the wall and built on top of that rubble that you can see literally tipped off the side of the wall there. In amongst those top deposits is a fragment of a later stone floored longhouse. So we've got a sequence from first arrivals, people making do in the buildings that are already there, through to building something else, through to building something really substantial in stone later on. So that's the kind of thing we were hoping that we'd see some evidence for, maybe. And we do, because the entrance to the big roundhouse at Swandro was eventually filled with rubble and tumble. And in the top of that rubble and tumble were 2 cats, articulated cat, well, semi-articulated cat skeletons, some bits of sheep that had been butchered and chopped up, and a coin of Enred, a stiker. This is a Northumbrian king. He's a really obscure but really useful Northumbrian king who virtually doesn't appear in the records at all, but we do know his reign was from about 810 to 840, which is really handy. So a 9th century coin with 2 cats dead cats, which Joe worked on for his masters, in the entrance to that building. And then there's other things. The roundhouse wall, the central roundhouse wall, has been demolished partly in a really weird way. Lots of stone and rubble pushed off it. You can see how it's landed from that wall. And within that rubble were two fragments of a human skull. And a piece of a femur, a very small piece of femur. So, but then when you look at other areas of the site, as we've worked over the years, it starts to make more and more sense. So there's the middle picture is that same. But you can see there are other areas where whole walls have been tipped over sideways. And in some cases, Steve was talking about those big upright orthostats, they've gone as well. There's whole piles of them, like a stack of cards just fallen in these areas. And all of this is all over the site. And actually the wall of the roundhouse is kind of curiously level all the way around, which suggests that somebody has done that, has taken some of that stone away. And when you look at along the site, so this is kind of along the diameter of that roundhouse, you can see this destruction. That is not the way a round building falls down. And moreover, within some of those orthostats, trapped between two of those orthostats, was a tiny pig skeleton articulated, like it, hadn't made it out before that lot came down. Which again is not the way a building falls down, and certainly not the way a building is eroded by the sea. So, and over the top of all this destruction was a layer of shillet, which is, you can maybe just see at the bottom, these very tiny fine bits of flat stone that are both used as pin stones to kind of keep dry stone walls level, but also the stone flakes over time. So when you take stone away, you get left with lots and lots, and it's hell to dig because it's very sharp, as our students can tell you. But there was a layer of this over the entire site, which suggests that this building has been destroyed and the stone has been taken away somewhere else. And who took that stone away? Well, no. And just recently, as the students have been working, going through the animal bone from all the years we've been excavating, this came up. Fragments of a human pelvis with some charring around the edge of it, and it was found right there in the top of all that material that had filled that building in a layer of burnt stone and ash. I think we can say possibly who destroyed that building and what's going on. And we've got other Viking period finds as well, which seem to support that. So very quickly, going back to that longhouse. Is that an 11th century longhouse? Well, possibly not. It may have ended up as an 11th century longhouse, or later even, that might be what happened in the end. But it's a very, very long building. We looked at it this summer, we did a new plan of it. The bottom end, the kind of byre end, with the entrance in the central short wall, is down towards the bottom of the screen. And you can see how it shoots off towards the shore, so the top end is lost in the erosion on the beach. But at a minimum, this thing is over 30 metres long and about 5 metres wide on the inside. And that's a very, very big longhouse. And it's probably been adapted later. That's certainly what we see in other sites we've looked at around the Northern Isles. But there's a very good suggestion that this may have been at least a 10th century building to start with. And obviously we can't dig that one, so here's one I prepared earlier. This is Underhull, which is in the north of Shetland in Unst. And this we thought was a very big longhouse. This is about 25 metres long and about 4.5 metres wide. And it's beautiful, you can see a round upside end at this end, and then the byre end would be down there. And this is the kind of thing probably this is 10th century. And that's probably the kind of thing we're looking at with the Western Swandro roundhouse. So this summer, the one bit we did dig was on the other side of the wall, where that byre end comes out. we noticed there was a very dry patch. It's normally very boggy on that side. And we managed to get permission to just open a very small area, and it's just paving. There's just paving there, right in alignment with the end of that building, right where you'd expect a hard standing if you've got animals coming in and out at the end of the byre from a longhouse. And we've got some material from that we hopefully will get a date from. So, and then of course, just as you get to the exciting bit, like always happens, we had to put it all back again. So like every year, we put all the stone back, we put all the tarps down and everything else, and we're just hoping now that it'll all still be there for us to go back and at least finish the Iron Age part this summer. I think that's it. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Julie and Steve. That was a really exciting lecture, and I would say that the wind behind the window gave us some bit of enhanced experience. So I felt a bit like being unique. We have some time for some questions from the audience. John, yes.
Why is it a roundhouse and not a block?
It's Brock-like. We've debated whether we should call this a Brock or not for some time. The building itself is probably the earliest phase, from what we can see, is very much like the large roundhouse at Boo, which is about the same date as the roundhouse at Toft's Nest, but much larger, with very thick walls. What we haven't got is the major characteristics of a Brock. Whether or not they were once there and have gone with erosion, we're not sure. It is monumental in scale. It has the same function in being the centre of the settlement and being a prestigious building that's taken hours to build. It looks like it's multi-story, so it has a lot of the characteristics of a Brock, but it doesn't have the galleries, the internal staircases that we would normally associate with it. So we've been quite careful in calling it a monumental roundhouse rather than going down a Brock which has particular characteristics. So we've just been careful.
Thank you.
I'm curious, you talked about them doing copper work in the Hearth area, first century BC AD. I mean, I know nothing about the background uses of copper at that age.
Right.
Where's the copper coming from?
The copper is local. It's various copper deposits from Rousay. Rousay is quite rich in minerals, and there is an outcrop less than a mile away, I think.
And there's lead on the island, or was lead. There was a lead mine on the island as well. The one thing there isn't is tin.
No.
But there is tin in some of the samples we have from the site, which suggests they're getting the tin from, I mean, that would have to be Cornwall, I think is the nearest source. And
some of the bronzes, if I remember rightly, Jerry was a little worried because we thought it was actually later. We thought it was Pictish, so the architecture of that building suggested a Pictish building. But the radiocarbon dates, we've got a string of radiocarbon dates which give us a much earlier context. But the copper alloy has traces of quite high traces of zinc in, and presumably what's happening is they're getting that from importing material in from the Roman world.
Yes. Any evidence of the fuel used in the hearth and furnace?
Probably, but we haven't gone through those. But yes, we have samples, but we haven't gone through them yet, so I don't know. But yeah, obviously that's going to be the other major problem with somewhere like this, is what you're using for fuel, as it was in Shetland as well. I should explain for other people that there's not a lot of trees in Orkney or Shetland, and so timber and therefore charcoal is quite difficult to obtain. So I'll let you know on that when we get to those samples.
I think the one thing is that we're very much influenced by a modern landscape, which is a treeless landscape, and I think in the past that there would have been reservoirs of woodland that probably was managed.
Certainly.
We're dealing with hazel and willow and things like that.
Hazel, I was going to say, delving back into the deep past when I was working on the pool material, and not thinking about things like that, but certainly the charcoals I remember from there was a lot of willow and some hazel, and it looked quite managed. You know, it was all the same kind of size. And then, of course, there was quite a big change when you got to the Viking period, because we had some oak charcoal from the Viking period at pool. But certainly in the Iron Age and Pictish, it was just things like willow. There is peat, of course, or was peat on Rousay, and you can make, you'd know more than me, but I mean, I've met people in Unst and other parts of Shetland who said they could make charcoal from peat. How good it would be, I don't know. But the other thing that again, thinking about old Scatness, not necessarily here, but the other thing I've wondered about from time to time is when you find big dumps of charred grain on site, because basically it might have happened accidentally, but you quite often find this stuff saved, as if it's been saved for some reason. And you know, that's pretty pure charcoal, but very small, obviously very small fragments.
Okay, you mentioned iron smelting. Were there iron deposits? Are there iron deposits?
Yes, not great ones.
Would it have been imported?
There's lots of what's termed as bog iron, which is iron-rich deposits at the interface of water tables. You get thick crusts of iron which could be utilised. I think we regard the islands in the past as perhaps being quite insular, but we've got Roman trade goods making their way through. It's probably exchange mechanisms coming through. We've got Roman glass, for example. And I think the evidence that we have is so fragmentary, it's difficult to build that total picture of contact. But I think there must have been greater contact in the past than we perceive. We just think of it as being quite insular, but I think that there would have been major trade networks going through. I mean, there is a reference, isn't there, when Claudius arrives from an embassy from the kings of King of Orkney, or whatever title one he may have had.
But you know, you're probably right. There's probably material coming in as well that's then being reused, because you're not going to do what we do and waste materials like that, I would imagine.
Okay. Thank you. One more question, yeah?
Forgive my memory, but did you mention anything Neolithic?
No.
No, but we haven't got that. Okay, Steve and I, let's say there's a difference of opinion on this. We did originally think there was fairly good evidence that there was some kind of Neolithic cairn there. Then we realised that most of the walls we were seeing, even though they're really well built and very Neolithic looking, are actually part of these accretions of walls around the Roundhouse. Yeah. But I don't know if you noticed on that, there are certain things that are under all those walls that still look strange, and we don't have a date for, and it's obviously earlier than 500 BC. And there are one or two artifacts as well which are Neolithic, including one that actually came from that 1970s excavation of the Roundhouse, which appears to be a part of a polished axe.
Yeah, just to put this into context of what John was saying, a number of Iron Age roundhouses and brocks have Neolithic associations, normally with Neolithic chamber tombs. There's the site at Pyrwell that was excavated by Neil Sharples, Colin Renfrew's excavations at Contoness, and the excavations at Howe, all of which, two of them, Contoness and Pyrwell, had large early roundhouses underneath them, and Howe had, which was a Brock site, underneath the Brock was a Neolithic chamber tomb. So there is this association, and certainly I think there's various associations on Rousay with some of the other sites, but at the moment we haven't got the evidence that we'd hoped for. We thought it's going to be a simple relationship, but the archaeology is so complicated and so deep, and the combination of that and limited time, once one stripped the site, and there's a narrow window of excavation before one can put it back again.
So I'd say no, there isn't evidence for it at the moment. I would not bet my life on there not being something Neolithic under all of that, but that's archaeology, isn't it?
So this summer, when you finish.
But there is a very strange feature that we don't understand, which is either a cell to an earlier building, or it's something else. It appears to be a well because it's full of water, but it's not a well. It doesn't have steps in the right way. It's not built the right way, and we don't know what that is, and we can't reach the bottom of it because it's full of water. And if you try and pump out the water, it fills up faster than you can pump it out.
It's on the water table. Basically, you're pumping the island.
You're pumping the island
water
dry. There's an aquifer of fresh water under the site, as well as the sea coming in. So we're kind of hit both ways by the water. So maybe we need a marine archaeologist.
There are a few of them in this room. So okay, thank you very much. I think there is some time for a few words from the head of the school.
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to say thank you ever so much for a fantastic talk, and for the privilege of being involved in such a fantastic project. One thing that's worth mentioning is that the Swandro project has also been shortlisted for the university's Outstanding Achievement Awards in Teaching and Learning. And I think it's a really good reflection of how many students have gained so much over the years from the project. And to actually get a Teaching and Learning Award shortlisted from the university and a research award essentially from current archaeology for the same project is great. I was really privileged to go with Julie and, as you saw, a couple of former students to pick up the Current Archaeology Award for Rescue Project of the Year, which was a public vote. But Steve wasn't able to join us in that. So I thought it would be quite nice to represent the award to Steve and Julie together. So we have the Current Archaeology 2024 Rescue Project of the Year.